The biggest stuff coming at WWDC today. We don't have much time as this is one of those videos that will be relevant for literally a few hours, though you can of course come back and check my work later to see how accurate we were. First of all, iOS 17, we have heard about the new Nightstand mode in the lock screen. It'll most likely only come to the always on displays, so that's the iPhone 14 Pro and later, though there might also be on earlier phones when they're connected to power. Now, if this is true, we will also probably see Apple releasing some sort of MagSafe charging stand designed for the Nightstand 2 later in the year when the software is actually made fully public. Apple loves a little accessory that they can charge you a drop extra for. People are excited for this event too. Apple's stock price is basically trading at an all-time high right now. The buzz is hitting different, and I wish I was in California right now. If nothing else, Apple has started selling Ted Lasso merchandise in the Apple Park Visitor Center. Now, do I love Ted Lasso? No. It's awkwardly written when most of the characters are British but written by an American. But the merchandise is cool, and it makes me hope that Apple will soon sell branded clothing in all of their Apple stores. I would be 100% down for that. New wardrobe, here I come. There's also a new journaling app coming which will allow you to record your activities and your mood and potentially share this with friends, which I've got to say sounds a little bit like Apple is trying once again to make a more private social networking system. RIP iTunes Ping. Now, there's very little clarity on the updates to macOS, although we are expecting some more Macs to be unveiled and shipped soon after the keynote. First, the 15-inch MacBook Air. Now, I still think there is an outside chance of the M3 chip being inside, even if it's not on the 3nm architecture that we'd hoped for. But I do think the biggest clue to whether we are going to get the M3 at the keynote is if the Mac Studio with M2 Ultra is introduced before this MacBook Air. If we haven't seen the MacBook Air by the time that comes up, then it's probably going to get M3 on the inside, as it's a new generation after the M2 Ultra. The M2 Ultra is also expected to appear though, but not inside the Mac Pro that we were all expecting a few weeks ago, but in that Mac Studio update. That's going to potentially have 24 cores, 76 GPU cores, and up to 192 gigabytes of unified memory. That thing is going to be a beast. Now, don't expect new displays to go along with it though. Those appear to be on hold, at least for now. And the Apple Reality headset, as well as the pair of micro LED 4K Sony displays, external screen, and a combination of glass, aluminium, and carbon fiber in the build. We're also hearing about built-in speakers, which I thought must be there because Apple can't rely on everyone 100% to have AirPods or simply have no sound at all, but also reportedly an X1 processor, 8 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, 64 gigabytes of unified memory, and an insane metal score of 141,585. And unfortunately, this has already been flagged as almost certainly faked, or at least inaccurate, by Geekbench themselves. What will power the system remains to be seen officially, but it's been rumoured that a pair of M2 processors would be inside it. Now, that would make sense more than a single M2 Pro, as we know that the M2 can be cooled passively, like in the MacBook Air, so you could put those on opposite sides, whereas the M2 Pro needs fans. Fans would add weight, noise, and a potential distraction to something head-mounted, so this makes a lot of sense. And of course, as this is shipping later in the year, there might just be an M2-powered development hardware kit, with the retail version coming with a pair of M3 chips, better performance and power efficiency, as well as potentially all the ray tracing stuff that was intended for the A16 being fixed. And here goes with some of your questions. Joe asks, I gave answers, if Final Cut Pro on the iPad is a one-to-one feature parity like the macOS version of Final Cut, would you switch to the iPad version for editing or stick to what you know on the Mac? And obviously this question came in a little bit before it went fully live. We know that it's not exactly 100% feature parity, however, it's pretty close. I could quite easily edit my videos on the iPad using Final Cut Pro. I don't think it would cause me any problems at all, except that I don't own an M1 iPad Pro, so it's not really an option for me. I've got the iPad Air, but it's the A14 version, so not really an option for me. But yeah, I don't think I'd have any problems with it. I could do it. But I do like having my big screen. That's kind of the only downside to me. Joe asks, I gave answers, how often should you back up your devices? I do it twice a week. Now, I think Apple has got a really great system already with Time Machine. I think the more often you can back up, the better. If I'm completely honest though, there's very little stuff that is actually mission critical that lives purely on my Mac. All of my videos and my photos live in iCloud Photos, so that's all fine anyway. With the Mac itself, pretty much anything that I do that's critical gets done and then sent off. There's no long-term projects that I tend to work on that are just stored on there. Pretty much it would be video files. I think if you can use Time Machine, it's a really, really good system. But if you can't, yeah, a couple of times a week is pretty good. But remember, the longer your interval between backups, the more stuff you will lose if you have some sort of failure. But remember as well, computers are a lot more reliable than they used to be too. iBonnie asks, ICave answers, do you think iOS 17 will have redesigned icons or stay the same like iOS 16? Now, actually, having thought about what's going on with the headset, I think it sounds like there's going to be a 3D interface that's kind of based on the iPad, but with 3D style icons. So it could be that they do get a little bit more depth added to them, and hopefully that aesthetic would move across to the rest of Apple's ecosystem too. I'd love to see a little bit more texture, a little bit more depth, but it doesn't really make that much difference, and obviously you can change icons now. Maybe we'll get a video coming out on how to customize the look of your iOS pretty soon. And Greg West asks, ICave answers, might the Final Cut Pro for iPad become a free app for Apple One subscribers? And could this subscription plan ever trickle down to non-professional apps like Pages and Keynote, leaving only the free web-based versions for non-subscribers like Microsoft Office's 365? I'm pretty sure we're not going to see Apple's Office, the iWork suite, going to a subscription model, and the main reason for that is that it's a selling point for the iPhone and the iPad and Macs that you get an Office suite included. It drives the hardware sales. So I don't think that's what they're going to do. I don't think as well that Final Cut is going to come as a freebie for Apple One. That would sort of disincentivize Apple from doing the updates regularly that we're all hoping is going to happen as a result of the subscription stuff. But I do think that the desktop version will get a subscription version or a subscription option fairly soon, that it's going to all move over to subscriptions. I'm just hoping that people that have already bought it will get to keep free access to it, even if they don't get new features going forward. That is a potential. That would suck a little bit for people that have bought it, but also the $5 a month, if it stays somewhere close to that, I think is pretty fair. Master Kavalchak asks, ICave answers, do you think the TSMC 3nm yield struggles will affect the timeline for the Ultra series chips? For example, future Studio Macs, not to mention the Pro. I think there have definitely been some issues with 3nm, which I think why Apple is pushing for this M2 based Ultra to go into the Studio. Then maybe the M3 is what we get for the Pro eventually. I do think it's affecting it. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but I also think that M3 may well not be 3nm either. Tim Kinetics asks, ICave answers, do you think we'll still see 3nm Macs in 2023, or are Apple using all of the 3nm production capacity for A17 chips for the iPhones this year? M3 Macs in 2023 or 2024? I genuinely don't know at this point. I think we will definitely see M3 this year, but whether we see 3nm M3 is another matter completely. I have a creeping feeling that it's going to be that N4 process that they used on the A16 chips, because that's what the cores were designed for in the first place. If they don't have to scale them down and they can make them more consistently at the slightly larger size, I think they might do that. Hopefully they fix the ray tracing to go into those GPUs. That would be still a great feature addition, and you get a little bit more speed and you get a little bit more cores. That makes sense to me, but I think 3nm is probably going to be next year at this point. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, it is WWDC later. I'll be all over Twitter. Don't forget to follow me. It's at @ICave_Dave, because somebody had the without an underscore, I think, or I just messed it up. Who knows? But thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one when we know a lot more about what's happening. Want the latest Apple news, leaks, and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.